It has become customary among incoming presidents of the state bar to relay a story that goes like this. When they were asked by the nominating committee if they'd accept a nomination to run for president-elect, they sought the advice of a good friend or a colleague, and invariably the advice they received was, "What are you, nuts?" But when I approached my friends and asked them, "Should I do this? Should I run?" they all said, "Go for it. Sounds great. Thumbs up." And from this fact pattern, I am led to one inescapable conclusion. I don't have very good friends. I kid, of course. I have the best family, friends, and colleagues that anyone could hope for, and I'd like to thank them for all their help. First, to my wife, Megan, the most important part of any equation involving me. Thank you for supporting me, helping me in every way, and agreeing to go on this journey with me, even though you think I work too hard already. Second, thank you to my family, represented today by my dad, Rob, my brothers, Mark, Jeff, and James, and my mom couldn't make it here tonight, but she's with us in spirit. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for being there when I needed you, and thank you for always convincing me and encouraging me to go on. A special thank you to my brother, Jeff, who is a top-notch estate planning attorney at Godfrey & Kahn, who sponsored this reception. And thank you for getting the word out and helping with my campaign. I really do appreciate it. Thank you as well to my friends, including my good friend Erin and her husband Nathan, who did me the honor of letting me officiate their wedding. And thank you to Chris Shattuck, my friend, who didn't rat me out, and former colleague, for all the advice that you've given me along the way. I really appreciate it. A big thank you to my firm, Conerman and Kalis, for supporting me and agreeing to pick up the slack when I'm called away to attend to bar duties. My partners are here tonight, except for one who's in trial, and I'd like to recognize them. I got Matt Gerdish, Eric Von Helms, Melinda Bialzik, Sam Wazotsky, Daryl Zoll. And the one who's in trial is, let's give him a hand. Come on. They're the reason I'm here. I went to each of them and I said, if you don't want me to do this, you have veto power, and none of them did. So they are as much to thank as anyone. And the one who couldn't make it here tonight is Zach Whitney, who's fighting the good fight in trial. And I could not and would not have done this without their support and knowing that we have each other's backs. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone who supported me and who helped with my campaign. I'd like to thank each of you by name, and I actually started writing down a list, and when I got to 104 people and wasn't even halfway close, I thought, okay, I can't do it. That's not fair to these people to subject you to that reading of names. But to each and every person who helped along the way in whatever way they could, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and if there's any way I can return the favor, it would be my honor and my pleasure to do so. I'd also like to thank Governor Jennifer Johnson, who I think is here somewhere, for her service to the bar. Like I say, one of the favorite aspects I had of the campaign was getting to know her better. She's an amazing person, a brilliant lawyer, an exceptional human being, and I will be exceptionally cross if she's not someday holding this gap. So why did I say yes to the nomination? A lot of people have asked me that, some sincerely, some a bit sarcastically. But what attracted me to the state bar is I've always been interested in how the legal system works as a whole, how the practice of law functions in the aggregate rather than in individual pieces. And don't get me wrong, I love my practice, I love working with clients, I love helping solve their legal problems, but I'm always thinking about the system and how we can continue to work to help to make it better. And that's why I put my hat in the ring when I saw there was an opening in the Board of Governors. At my very first meeting, the Board of Governors was asked to vote on whether the BOG would support a policy position opposing indiscriminate juvenile shackling. At the time, it was the practice in certain courts in certain places, there was no uniform standard, that when juveniles accused of crimes appeared in juvenile court, in many instances they did so in shackles. Not because there'd been an individual determination that a particular child was a flight risk or was a danger to themselves or others or likely to be disruptive or disrespectful. We did it because that's how we did it. And a lot of people thought this was wrong, including the children in the law section. That section had decided to oppose indiscriminate juvenile shackling, and they asked the Board of Governors to support that position. So the BOG discussed the issue. A lot of us felt that when a child is appearing in court in an interaction that is likely to have an impact on their entire life, they should appear as people, not prisoners. If an individual child presented a risk, of course the court could make an order to make that child subject to appropriate restraint, but there should be a reason before we do that. So the BOG decided to support that policy position. The BOG's vote was followed by a petition to the Wisconsin Supreme Court that was ultimately adopted, and the law was changed. When juveniles appear in court in Wisconsin, unless the court makes an individualized finding supporting shackling, kids get to appear in court as kids. The effort leading up to that change in the law involved a large group of people, including numerous circuit court judges, appellate court judges, the bar and its leadership, and a list of people and entities that's more than a page long. And ultimately, it was the justices of the Wisconsin Supreme Court who voted to accept the petition and change the rule. My role in all of that was non-existent. It was minuscule, especially compared to the many, many others who did the heavy lifting and the hard work to make it happen. But we all pushed together on the wheel of change, and the wheel turned. If an individual attorney representing an individual child before the rule change had wanted to oppose shackling, they could have filed a motion with the court to seek relief, providing that their client was not put in shackles during a court appearance. And if successful, that attorney would have made things better for one child at one court appearance. That is needed, valuable, vital, and important work. But by changing the rule, we made things better for all children who appear in Wisconsin courts forever. That is the kind of change that can only happen at the level of procedure for the entire system. And after that one vote, which was just one part of my first meeting of the Board of Governors, I was hooked. So I said yes when the nominating committee asked me to run for the position of president-elect. Now, I was promised that I would have a full year to learn from the president, to shadow her, absorb her wisdom, sit in on meetings, and see how the sausage was made. And during that year, I was told I could right-size my practice, I could wrap up existing files, I could transition management responsibilities, and be very careful about intake so I could ease into the huge commitment I would be making if I prevailed in the election. Fate, however, had different plans. On March 15th of this year, we all learned that then President-elect Jane Bucher was appointed by Governor Evers to the circuit court judge, to be circuit court judge of Branch 2 in Greene County. Wonderful result, but judges cannot be officers of the state bar. So Judge Bucher, unfortunately, had to step down as president-elect and could not assume the presidency today. So whoever won the election would immediately jump into the position of president without the training and transition year we were promised when we said yes to the nominating committee. It was not lost on me that this news of an abrupt and fundamental change in the top leadership position I was seeking broke on the Ides of March. Around the same time, the two assistant executive directors of the State Bar, Assistant Executive Director and Chief Financial Officer Paul Marshall and Assistant Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer Jan Wood, announced that they'd both be retiring shortly after I was to take office. These are giants in the bar. They're the number two people on the org chart behind only the executive director. And so not only was a relatively green president going to be taking the office prematurely, but that president would be leading an organization that was down two of its key people. So before another shoe drops on me, I have one question for you, Executive Director Larry Martin. Larry, you good? Then we're fine, all good. It's the nature of the practice of law that you have to roll with the punches. Your key piece of evidence gets eaten by a shark the day before trial, you work the problem, you figure it out. The practice of law is incredibly difficult. You have to always be right, even if you have only part of the information you need. You have to answer questions that are impossible to answer and predict things that are impossible to predict. And if you're a litigator, you do this in the context of an environment in which there's another trained and skilled practitioner whose job it is to oppose you at every single turn. If I'm exaggerating a bit here, it's not by much. What we do as lawyers is very, very difficult, and it requires an enormous amount of time, effort, and fortitude to do it well. Which leads me to the first point that I want to emphasize in my year in office, attorney well-being, particularly the brutal toll the practice of law can take on the mental health of attorneys. A 2023 survey of nearly 3,000 lawyers found that 71% of them said that they experienced anxiety. 38% reported feeling depressed, and more than half of them reported that at times they felt physically or mentally overwhelmed. These are appalling figures, and they're not new. The bar and its leadership have recognized these issues and the need to promote lawyer well-being for some time, And it's been a point of emphasis for President Dietrich and many bar presidents before him. So I'm not treading new ground here. But I will say that both Governor Johnson and I placed mental health front and center when we were speaking with Wisconsin licensed attorneys during the campaign. And I cannot tell you how many lawyers came up to us and said, thank you. When I was first starting my practice, nobody talked about this stuff. Even raising the issue of mental health was considered a sign of weakness. And I can tell you that when I started my practice, that's how it felt. And the fact that it is no longer the universal rule owes a lot to the tremendous efforts of many people, including the State Bar and its leadership over many years. But we need to continue these efforts. We need to destigmatize discussions of the impact of practice of law on mental health. We need to encourage an open dialogue on how to maintain good mental and physical health practices and educate lawyers on what they should do if they experience a mental health crisis. Developments in neuroscience have shed light on what happens inside a lawyer's brain. Studies of law students show that students unintentionally put themselves in what in layman's terms is an adrenaline overdrive. Law students do that because it helps them study longer and it feels like it helps them think faster and more critically. And I doubt it's a surprise to many of the people in this room that lawyers do this unconsciously. And it's not to say that lawyers are the only ones who figured out how to kickstart our adrenal highway in our caffeinated go-go-go society. But attorneys do it in significantly higher numbers than the general population, and they do it more often. This overactive adrenal response overstimulates the amygdala, which is the panic center in the human brain, and an overstated amygdala floods our bodies with cortisol, which is the body's main stress hormone. So this all-day rush phenomenon that many lawyers experience, beginning in law school or even earlier, causes our brains to exist in a chronic state of panic, not due to any weakness of character, but because of physical changes to our brains. The point of this is that the negative feelings that we sometimes have as lawyers correlate with observable chemical changes in our brain, which, once we understand them, we can work on improving. It should be as normal to say I'm going to work on my triceps as it is to say I'm going to exercise my hippocampus. And that's the kind of education and practical problem-solving tools that the bar can provide to help us improve our health physically and mentally and increase our professional satisfaction, which is one of the bar's core missions. I've already begun working with Amber Alt, who's the new head of the Wisconsin Lawyers Assistance Program, on what we can do to help her help us all. And if any of you have any ideas or want to help with that process, please let me know. The second point I want to emphasize is the plight of underrepresented communities in Wisconsin. We have severe attorney shortages in certain areas, including criminal lawyers and lawyers in Wisconsin's legal deserts, particularly in rural Wisconsin. The problems in these areas are dire. I am very happy to report that the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, spearheaded by Chief Justice Ziegler, has recently announced the creation of an attorney retention and recruitment committee to address these problems head-on, particularly in rural counties. The committee will be led by the chief judges from Wisconsin's 9 judicial administrative districts and includes the deans of Milwaukee and Marquette law schools, attorneys and judges from throughout the state, and representatives from the state bar that President Dietrich and I have appointed. I think that the committee has enormous potential and is addressing a vital need, and the bar is very happy to assist the court's efforts to address this important issue. I'm also happy to report that just a few hours ago, President Dietrich announced the creation of a criminal justice task force designed to address the specialized needs of criminal justice lawyers. The work will be long and hard, but we're all working together to try to make things better. And 2 other points I want to emphasize before I let you get on with your evening. The first is that during my campaign, I repeatedly said that the State Bar of Wisconsin is for all Wisconsin licensed attorneys. I meant it then and I mean it now. I believe that the bar has an obligation to provide meaningful value to every member. So if we're not living up to that obligation in any way, I want to hear about it. If you have ideas on how we can be a better bar, ideas about things we should be doing, things we should not be doing, or things we should be doing better, my door is always open. Please let me know. And lastly, I want to acknowledge the historical significance and some of the milestones we're celebrating. June is Pride Month. June 17th, 2024 was Wisconsin Women Lawyers Day, celebrating the admission of the first female attorney admitted to practice law in Wisconsin 150 years ago. And today is Juneteenth, which celebrates General Granger's issuance in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865 of General Order Number 3, proclaiming the freedom of all slaves in the last holdout of the Confederacy. Lawyers have always been at the forefront of fighting for civil rights, whether it's advocating for changes in the law or fighting to ensure that everyone receives the protections the law already should be providing. This is a long and a difficult struggle, but as officers of the court, who are sworn to uphold the fundamental principles of our legal system, it is our obligation to ensure that words like freedom, equality, and justice have meaning not just on paper, but in practice. I also think that now is an excellent time to reflect and thank those who came before us to get us where we are today. We must always keep pushing on the wheel of change and trying to make things better. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with all of you to improve the practice of law in Wisconsin. As I like to say, there's a reason it says forward on our flag. Thank you.